Hello, welcome to part 2 of our GitHub Bootcamp. Today we're going to be talking about Agile and KPIs. Really interesting session today. I will turn this over to Dave Burnison to introduce our presenters.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where and when you're watching this. My name's Dave Burnison. I'm a technical advocate from GitHub. Welcome to our GitHub Bootcamp on YouTube Live and Twitch. Microsoft's mission statement is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And GitHub's vision is to be the home for all developers. We're bringing together GitHub's vision and Microsoft's mission statement to say that GitHub will become the home for your development tool, DevOps tools, empowering more than 73 million users to achieve more for their organizations. We have 6 sessions. Some sessions are for everyone and some are for more technical people. We had our first session for everyone this past Tuesday, and this second session is also geared towards everyone. In today's session, we've got 4 important topics: the logical architecture of GitHub Enterprise Cloud and GitHub Enterprise Server, GitHub Agile Management, insights that you can gain using GitHub, and DevOps KPIs with Grafana. And of course, we'll be answering your questions as we go, and we hope to have time for more questions at the end. So behind the scenes, we have subject matter experts from GitHub answering the questions typed in by the audience. Now let me introduce today's presenters. Today we have Khan Tang, Abdusalam Menassar, Charlie Gu, and Shen Yu. Take it away, Khan.
Thank you very much, Dave. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on when and where you're watching this. So my name's Khan. I'm the DevOps Dojo Community Lead at Microsoft. So today, I am going to partner with Epsilon on their overall information architecture and agile management. And then Charlie and Shen Yu, they're going to partner, work on the GitHub Insight and the KPI. So before we start, right, let's do a little, I would say, review here, a little bit of background here. So let me just review quickly for what we have done in the session 1. So we actually had a lot of questions from audience, right? What is the difference between the Azure DevOps and GitHub, right? So we had that comparison and when to use what. And so now, before we move to session number 2, I want to actually provide a little bit of perspective and the context. So first of all, right, we, all the presenters, we're not actually from GitHub. So we are the new learner of the GitHub products, right? So that's why our kind of perspective, actually, the context matters. So the first one, I will say, if you look at it, we all from GitHub. We all from an Azure DevOps background, right? So if you are, let's say, college grads, right? So you only worked on the GitHub, and then you probably, that's a very different perspective. But we are right from an Azure DevOps world. So we always have that mental model when we move to GitHub. So, okay, this is what I've done in Azure DevOps. What does that mean in GitHub, right? So we always have that mental model while we'll transition to GitHub. And the second part is most of us from open source, right? We just leverage the public and the private repository, and then we just use it. But then we actually don't get a chance to see the enterprise side of GitHub, right? So that two perspective really is going to drive our conversation today. So the question is, how do we cross the bridge, right, from the ADO world or even, other Jira and other more epic feature, very structural way to GitHub? So today's conversation or the presentation, we really captured the learning through ADO, from ADO to GitHub. It helped me. It definitely helped Epsilon, my partner. We're going to talk about this topic together and helped our team. So we really hope it's going to help you, right? So I just want to set the context where we're coming from, and then we'll deep dive into the main topics. So of course, we're going to start with the fundamental concept. What are the main building blocks of GitHub? And then we will look at information architecture. So you might say, whoa, that's a big word, right? Information architecture, what does that mean? Information architecture really is a science of organizing, labeling, and structuring the knowledge. So at the end of the day, right, when you start a new solution, you really want the information architecture really help you to find whatever you need, right, in a very easy, in a very fast, intuitive way. So that's what information architecture is about. And so if you look at any solution, any system, GitHub is no difference. You will have the information architecture of these four components. So number one is the organizational schema, the structure. Number two is a labeling system. And number three is how you navigate through, how easy you can navigate through from this part to other part, right? And of course, last one is a search. You should be able to very easily search the information you want. So that's the information architecture we're going to walk through today. So let's take a look at, let's demystify the GitHub concept. And so, right, people, if you're from ADO, from other, right, you say, okay, I don't see epic feature user story, right? It's kind of, it's a little different. That's okay. So we're going to deep dive each one of them. And so this actually component, we're going to look at each one of them, and then we will bring everything together. Repository. I think if you go back and look at history, I'm a student of history. So I always look at a history. So if you look at a repository, right, it's a really the core part of GitHub. Because at the beginning, basically, right, when they started with GitHub, is this repository. It's a folder that's available online. That means I'm working on something, maybe I don't know anyone else in the other side of the world, but then you are interested in the same thing. And so you and I, we can collaborate and we can build something we both, right, passionate about it. So it's a great way to connect people, the repository. So that's a root into GitHub history, right? So it's really absolutely in the culture that from beginning, we want to share, we want to collaborate because that's the brand butter at the core of the GitHub. So now we started with repository. As you can see, right, they have different levels. As a matter of fact, yesterday I was talking to Dave. We actually offer the 3 custom roles, right, besides the 5 standard roles. So now that you see a little kind of chart here, right? There's a relationship between other entity, which we're going to go through. So I ask you, once you finish this session, you always come back to revisit, right, the relationship, because right now we haven't even explained the other elements yet, right? So that's repository. Remember, it's really a folder online. Everybody can contribute. Now, issues. At the first time, right, again, like I said, we all from other world coming to GitHub, so we have really different perspective. And issue, that's kind of negative, right? I mean, we actually talk about joke around and say, that's kind of negative, right, in a sense. But it's really is a tracker. It's a tracking the things you want to work on, right? So it's a really actually powerful entity you can use in so many different ways. As you can see, right, it actually has a different relationship. So my partner, Ashley Epsilon, he's been living, and through the whole transition. So maybe you can give us a little bit your take on issues, how you use issues.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ken. Hello, everybody. So issues is actually really at the heart of everything you want to do from an agile perspective in GitHub, right? As you said, the term is sometimes might be misleading, but you can think of issue as really this container where you can create epics, features, whatever, methodology you're using. So it's really at the heart of everything we're going to be talking about. And we're going to be demonstrating how you can do that in a moment.
Excellent, excellent. So pull requests. And again, right, from me, I used to get, and so I always had to say, I'm actually submit the pull request. Why is a pull, right? Should it be push, right? So again, right, there's a lot of as a new person, I'm learning. I'm always kind of looking at my view, but to me, it's actually merging the request. So I'm saying I want to have this pull request to you, so I want to merge. So the pull actually is more from the maintainer perspective, right? You create this pull request, create a branch, and you want the maintainer to pull back into the main trunk. So that's why it's called pull request. It is absolutely powerhouse because the moment you start a pull request, and so you start to have a conversation and a back and forth with your team, right? And you have all the conversation actually jot down. And then once you really merge, right, there's a lot of things that are going to happen. So in the team 3 and 4, you're gonna see the power of the pull request. Just remember, because I thought it's a push request, but it's from the maintainer perspective. Label. This is another one. It's kind of quite interesting. It's like a tagging, right? So you tag anything. And then one of the things I learned in the GitHub, right? If you look at it in the ADO, right? Everything, you have a type called epic. You have a type called feature. You have a type called user story. Here, it's so flexible. You can tag anything. So maybe Epsilon, you can give your take as well for label, because I saw a lot of label you created
Yeah.
in the system.
You're actually spot on, really. When you say labels are like tags, it's exactly what it is. So you can assign multiples, as you're showing in the screen, multiple labels to an issue and so on. And actually, this is the mechanism that I'm going to be using in order to tag, an issue to become an epic, to become a feature, to become a user story. If you're using, let's say, the Scrum philosophy is going to be product backlog items, PBIs, So depending on how you want to use them. So labels are really this powerful mechanism that offers an amazing flexibility in order to do whatever you want to do actually in GitHub. So yeah.
Can't wait to see that demo. Template. Every time I hear template, I always say, oh, that's a small laziness. Because you want to do, there's something there, right? You want to repeat, you don't want to create, and you're smart because you did it once and you want to do again. So it's a smart laziness, which is kind of what I use. And it's a very powerful concept. There's so many ways actually using template in GitHub. Again, I'm gonna, because Epsilon is an expert, right, in those areas. So maybe give us an example of what we can use, right, in terms of a template in GitHub.
So it all comes down to efficiency in this discussion. So efficiency and standardization, right? So I was mentioning that you can create issues and then add labels to them, right? And with that, you have the flexibility. But if you have to do this every time you want to create an epic, for example, it's like you're wasting some time that you can be spending on something else. So you might think of creating templates for epics, for features, and then it will automatically put the right label based on what you want to create. You can do that for bug fixes, anything you want, basically. You can use template for that. So really powerful as well for efficiency.
Excellent, excellent. A project, and sometimes we call project board. So it's a really, I again, that's my learning, right? I feel it's like a Kanban board. You can move along, right? So do you agree, Epsilon? What's your view on project?
Yeah, absolutely. So project is actually, again, you mentioned issues as a kind of sounding negative kind of. Project may be creating some controversy sometimes as well, where people are saying we don't do projects, we are a product-centric organization. Really think of project, and we had the same debates actually over and over on Azure DevOps, right? You remember that?
Right.
So projects is really this container where you can use it for real projects with a start and a beginning and a project manager and so on. But in the Agile space, you can use that as a product backlog, a sprint backlog. You can even have multiple product backlogs. So it all comes down to creating a project and assigning the right issues and pull requests to it. So yeah.
Good point. Actually, we talk about from a project move to product, right? So from that angle, you may say, oh, it's a project, but really this is so flexible in the GitHub, like a label, like an issue. It's about the flexibility, right? And we talk about architecture. So excellent point. Milestone. So when I at the beginning when I studied, right, the GitHub, and I was looking for Spring and anything, and I said, why do we not have this sort of a time box, right? And then when I dig in the history of GitHub, oh, then I understand. What happened? Because open source is all about everybody come here working together, right? Everybody is remote. I don't even know you. So there's no like a timeline in the enterprise way, right? We normally say set the quarter and so on, so on. So it's very flexible. It's a continuous delivery. That's why the timeline actually doesn't really, it's not a concern of all those collaborator, right? But still, I'm so happy. Actually, they have this, I would say, concept of milestone. So again, Epsilon, give us a little bit of your take on the milestone here.
So it's really a smart way to regroup some activities based on a theme, or it's named milestone because there is a date related to it. So some people will use that as a sprint container, for example, or you want to use it as an objective and key result container, so you can have a milestone by key results. If you are doing OKRs. When you talk about the time frame and the iterations and so on, so that is the new experience as well on project that has been launched like few days ago, that allow the iteration path. So you will have multiple choices. Actually, really, GitHub is a toolbox. You will have multiple choices, and Milestone is one of them. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the last one is actions. So sometimes people, right? There's a little bit confusion here. There's a GitHub Actions, which is you can put it in another way, so your CI/CD platform. And so with that, the whole CI/CD, you can have workflow, right? It's like ADO, it's like even Jira, any other, Jenkins and so on. You have workflow. With the workflow, and you have jobs. So job means each job you actually can run in the same runner. And then within the job, you can have an actual action. The action is basically reusable piece of script, right? So this is kind of, so always GitHub Actions with S is the CI/CD, but then you can have action, which is your reusable piece of code or script. So after this session, I think it's available, everything, the video. So I highly suggest you kind of go back to look at a relationship of each one of them, right? Because again, as we're introducing each one of them, it's really difficult to explain the relationship, but you can always go back to visit. So now we have the entity. We're ready, right? So I hope this is helpful or useful for you. Now let's look at the information architecture. So if you're from open source world, right, you work with your team or individual contributing, you see the light blue area, right? So you pretty much work on the repository, and then all the pull requests and the issues and everything, right, related to your work. That's why when we started with GitHub, we don't see the rest of the site until we have access to the enterprise level capability. So then all the blue will be on the enterprise side. So you have an owner, you have build managers, you have the policies, you have an organizational setting, you have the owners, you have the members, you have a team, you have a team of team, right? So this part, on the right hand side, left hand side, you might not be able to see it when you're in the open source world. And one of the great things for GitHub is even you're within enterprise, you can actually invite the outside collaborator, right, with your partner, right? So it's a really, right, enable that collaboration. So let's double click, go next level with an organization. So you can, on a repository level, you actually have a lot of setting, as you can see on the left-hand side. There's a lot of setting. For example, this morning I have to do the two-factor authentication. All the security part of configuration, right, will be at an organization level. You can, right, let's say if you have a GHEC and you have the server installed, you actually can use the GitHub connector, and you can actually have that connection between both sides. You can do search, you can look at a contribution, the security alert, and a license sync, right? So that's a good part of if you have a both. Now let's go again, right? Information architecture, because we really want to outline this one, and later on you don't get confused. So at an organizational level, right, of course, you have a people, you have a team, and you have team of team, and of course, you have a members, you have a discussion. And so you have a project at organizational level. And I'm going to show you, right, actually, we use a lot of project at the repository level, but you do, right? Let's say you work on a project, you have a multiple repository, and then that project involves all the different repository, and then you can have a project at organizational level. You have insight at organizational level, you have a security setting and other setting at organizational level. Now, the most important one, and that's why when I always kind of make that mental comparison. When I log in ADO, I see, the very structure, right? The overviews, dashboards, and so on, the backlog. And if you go to GitHub, regardless you're the seasoner, the open source developer, or you're the first time, you will see on your face is the repository, because GitHub was really start from a repository, right, from the developer. So then within the repository, as you can see, you have one to many relationship, you have many issues, you have many pull requests, you have many discussions, you have many actions, you have many projects, you have many security setting and many insight setting, and also the KPIs, right, related to that repository, right? So this is a kind of interesting view. I mentioned that we can have a project at a repository level. We have a project at the organizational level, right? Remember that comparison. You can have a discussion only related to repository. You can have discussion actually at the organizational level. Of course, you have a security at the organizational level, and you have a security setting at the repository level. And of course, same as setting. So let's again go a little deeper. Let's go to repository. So a lot of time when we create a repository, we don't start from scratch. We want to start with some template, right? With, for example, the contribution guidance and the certain thing you want the people follow. So you always kind of would like to use template. And again, repository, like I mentioned, you can invite a collaborator, and the type is very important. Because most of the time, right, if it's a public, everybody can see it. And normally we create a private first, right? So you can collaborate, invite the people to contribute. And then one of the very important type is internal. So that means, for example, in session 6, we're going to talk about the inner source. So the inner source for DevOps Dojo, right, we have the internal type. So that means anyone in Microsoft, it doesn't matter which GPU you're in, as long as you're in Microsoft and you actually can see the code, you can do pull requests. So that's where you use the inner source, the internal type. Now let's deep dive a little bit the issues, right, we talked about. This is one of the things I probably will show you a few things. This is kind of quite interesting. You can actually create an issue from so many places. From a repository, maybe you look at the issue, someone put a comment, say, hey, this I think is we need to discuss. Boom, you can create an issue. And maybe a piece of code, which I'm going to show you, right? Look at the logging and then say, hey, this piece of code, actually, I think we need to discuss, because the logging is very important, especially from security perspective, right? So we should actually create an issue for this piece of code, right? Let's have a discussion, and you can have the discussion, you can have the notes, right? So that's why, I mean, as you can see, I'm excited. When I use GitHub, it's just so flexible. You can create an issue from so many different ways and really help you, right? Me as a developer, developer velocity, right? So that's the issue I will show you. And again, the labels, if you look at it here, there's so many ways you can tag in. Again, I'm going to leave that to later to Epsilon. He's going to show you completely how, tagging and to make everything make sense to you. You can use template, right, to create an issue. He's going to show you as well, and I can show you as well. And a milestone, right? Issue can be along the part of the milestone. Pull request is almost the same, right? So you can actually create so many places. You can have the labels and you have the template and so on, so on. The project, as I mentioned, right, I just want to say twice, we have project at organizational level, which you can link to multiple repository, and you can have the project at a repository level. But what is interesting is the purpose, right? Again, right, this flexibility. And if you really like a flexibility, you really like, right, if you set up the environment later on, you change it, which is our world, right? We're living. It's really the agile world. You might change months later the regional way. So there's many ways the the purpose actually you create a project as a list here. And then normally your type of work is the issues, the pull requests, and notes, right? You under the project. So before I go to a little bit of UI walkthrough, right? So let's just revisit the overarching the information architecture, right? So the repository is front and center in GitHub. And then of course, if you don't have the enterprise license, and you probably won't see the green part, right? So I'm going to demonstrate both a little bit, right? Just kind of get a sense of from a concept to the real environment. So let's let me bring my environment over here. Okay. So this is my my GitHub, and many years ago I created my GitHub account, right? So I don't have any public repository yet. So one of the things, right, you have to make linkage, right? So I'm let's say the GitHub user, but then now I belong Microsoft. So I can actually link my account from my personal account into Microsoft, my Microsoft account. So when you link, right, and this is where you're gonna see. So I can open this one. Let me click. And then that will come to Microsoft organization. So this is a part of a Microsoft open source, and this is our organization. So it's a virtual organization, right? It's really because people from pretty much all the BUs coming together. So we create this virtual organization. So because I'm the admin, so let's see what we have today is the YouTube Live Web 3 repository here. So I want to give you a little bit context. Why do we choose this one? So this is a Small Hotel 360. It's open source tool, right? So we're using this as a sort of reference implementation application. So as you can see, right, there's a really diverse, rich technology enabled solution, right? So you have Java, you have .NET, you have the microservices, you have mobiles, you have all the database, right? That's the reason at the time, 3 years ago, we decided to use this solution, Small Hotel 360, and it has all, like I say, the mobile, the Windows, the Linux, the Java, everything is here, technology, right? So we are, for this demo, we are choosing the coupon, which is Java, and the booking, which is .NET, and we have the backing as well. So, right, we said we're not just love .NET, we love Java, we love actually the infrastructure as a code as well. So that's why you see we're booking, which is .NET, and we're coupon, which is Java, and we have an infrastructure as a code component, right? So let's take a look at right from the information architecture perspective. So this is my organization, and I can, right, with an organization, if let's say I want to actually create a repository, you actually can open a one. So there's a two way to actually create another repository. So I happen have a template, which is this one already enabled. So if you pick that template, all you need to do is choose the type, and then you're ready to go. So you're basically take the whole template, everything already set up, you can reuse. But maybe you say, no, I want to start from scratch, right? So then you just have to fill all the information, right? So that's how you create a template, either starting from fresh and so on. So let's go to booking, which is the one we have, right? So if you look at now, like I say, everything is about a repository. So normally you log in, you see the repository. So look at the relationship here, right? So this is an organization, this is your repository, and each repository can have multiple issues, multiple pull requests, multiple discussions, which I will show, and multiple actions. You can have multiple projects, and then you can even have a wiki, which in this case, we put our OKR here. If you look at, we even have the whole OKR, the relationship and everything here, right? And then you have a security and so on, and the settings. So I'll walk you through a little bit here. Again, right, so here, if you look at this is your piece of code. Like I said, you can actually create through the template, to create another repository. So I'm not going to go through that. And let's look at the issues. We actually did a lot of data here, right? Look at the issues, right? And look at all the taggings here. And of course, you can always search. You say, oh, I want to look at maybe the Epic. You can very easily search by your Epic or any label you can do. And one thing you notice that so from the issue and from the pull request, you can set up your label here. So there's a default one. We add a lot of them. You just adding, the description and you select the color you want. You see your milestone, which Epstein is going to take you through all that together, right? So let's go back to the issue, right? One of the things you can create an issue, which is my favorite. So if you look at here, right? So I'm here, I'm looking at my code. Let's say this is my web application. Maybe the logging, I'm looking at it, maybe the logging message. So I'm looking at it here. I say, look at this piece of code, right? I think we really need to discuss how we're going to actually display the logging, maybe for security reason, or maybe we need to do more. And what you can do is you actually can reference to a new issue. The beauty of GitHub is really everything is linkable, even your piece of code. So now you see there's a link here. So you can say, we need to discuss, we need logging. Right, so you say, okay, this is something I need to actually create. So with that, you create a new issue. You can even say, hey, Epsilon, let's talk about this today, right? So I can do a comment here. So what happened was if you go to issues, so now this one I already created, right? So you can go to here. And so maybe I would say, let me say assign to, okay, I'm going to all assign to you today. And then I would say, that maybe is some, let's say, maybe enhancement we need to talk about, right? So now you add a label, and you can add all other things as well. And then even here, if you look at, I had a comments here. From the comment, I can create another issue too. That's why issue is such powerhouse. You from so many places, you have discussion, boom, you create an issue, and you can work on it, right? So that's a really, really awesome way. Pull request, as I mentioned, right? So it's a powerhouse. This is the one actually I created yesterday. As you can see, right, you can do pull requests. You have a discussion, and you assign people, and then you can ask for merging. You can have a discussion, as you can see, we have so many discussions here for that repository. You can have a lot of actions. We've been running .NET Java, so on. So as you can see, we have the continuous delivery. We have a CI, and one of the things actually we create action is when we're running in the pipeline, right, in GitHub, and if we run testing, and when the testing happen, the issue happen, right, or maybe a defect. And that defect we're going to save automatically to ADO. So I think team 4 and team 5 will show that. And then I mentioned that you can have a project. So as you can see, again, Epstein is going to show all the detailed projects for this repository. You're going to see that. I already show the wiki. You can do a lot of configuration, how you want to your repository, right, respond all the security concern. You can a lot of setting here. And of course, you have the insight, right, you want to see for this repository. That's why in the session 1, we talked about GitHub really has a very powerful insight more from a developer, right, repository perspective. ADO is more tend to be more on the agile management. And of course, you have a lot of setting here, right? So as you can see, I enable the template repository. So a lot of things you can actually setting if you look at everything here. And finally, I want to quickly show you, right? So I showed at a repository level. Now, this is at an organizational level. At an organizational level, for example, we have a many team. And in this case, in this live, we create a team of team. So as you can see, all 6 teams you're going to work with throughout the next 2 weeks, right? So all the team. And then you have a project at organizational level, which you're going to see even the beta version. It's with table view and so on and so on. And then you can have the insight. So the insight here is at organizational level, right? Not at a repo level. So it's different level. Look at the security, and look at the insight. And of course, at the whole organizational level, they're all the security concern, the configuration is going to be here. So it's a really right. Again, we don't have I probably take a lot of time, but it's a really a different way. But if you understand those components, you know how to navigate through. I think you're gonna love GitHub because that flexibility. So I think with that, I'm going to hand over to Epsilon, which is a very, very interesting. How do we do agile management, epic feature user story in GitHub?
All right, thank you, Ken. Thank you for the all the introductions and for setting the stage. So we're going to be talking a little bit about how you can achieve agile management with using the GitHub toolbox. So as we said in the beginning, and we talked about that with Ken, you need, if you're coming from the Azure DevOps world, where it's really structured, when you create a project in the beginning, you need to select a template like a Scrum, Kanban, or CMMI, or you can even create your own templates. But then you're gonna evolve within the rules that you'll be creating. In GitHub is really a toolbox where it's really flexible, so you can change the rules when needed. So it really helps you build this the agile processes as you're going. So it's really I like this piece actually. It's really like it. So what we try to do here is to do a mapping between the tools that are available on GitHub and some of the agile concepts. Obviously, what you see on the right is not an exhaustive list of the agile concepts. It's you can see the bias here, right? It's more coming from the Azure DevOps world, right? So this is what we try to do, to see actually what do we use from managing the flow on Azure DevOps and how can we achieve that on GitHub. So let's start from the epic. So what is an epic to start with? Maybe I know that Ken, you have a lot of experience in managing products and DevOps. So can you tell us a little bit what an epic is and some examples?
Oh, you're testing me here.
Yeah.
I would say epic is a kind of user-centric grouping, right? It normally can be defined in a big chunk of work that has common objectives. So typically, right, it's the high-level grouping for large cross-cutting, spanning maybe multiple value areas, sprints and release and the feature. So for example, in our example, right, the epic here, so managing guest activity online effortlessly, that's kind of big epic, right? Because it's going to cover both coupon and a booking and other one. So that would be my take.
Absolutely. Okay, that's great. And the idea is that if you want to create an epic, you need to create an issue and to give it a label. And you just saw that as Ken was doing the demo. You need to think about creating a template so people don't need to assign the label every time they create for an efficiency matter. We also mentioned earlier the fact that you can use Milestone if you want to link those to your objectives and key results, for instance. You have other examples of epics, Ken?
Yes.
Uh-huh. Okay. Okay, maybe you can give all the examples on the features as well, right? So the feature is going to be, an epic has multiple features, right? So the idea here is pretty much the same. You create an issue, you give it a label like a feature, and then you create a template for it to be efficient. We don't use Milestone for that because it's not that big. Can you give us any ideas on what a feature is, Ken?
Feature is actually gave a great level of details to describe a block of functionality that you're going to deliver new capability. So it should be actually sufficient, right, to have a estimation, right? The testable, it has to be testable. It should be small enough fit into the release, right? And it could be multiple sprints. So to me, feature should be always releasable. So for example, in the managed guest activity online effortlessly, I can give it two features. One is managed guest booking online. Another one is managed coupon for guests, right? So that's a kind of small enough on the Epic, and it's releasable.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. The other very, let's say, famous concept you have in Agile is the user story. If you're doing pure Scrum again, so user story is not one of the principles. It's going to be product backlog items, but this is a very famous actually technique and tool that is used. Can you talk a little bit about user story, Ken?
I always use that as a persona, as a someone. I want a capability, and so I can achieve a certain goal and deliver a certain value, right? So that's a kind of standard template. In our example, for example, right in the booking side, I can say as a hotel manager, I should be able to view guest booking online, so I will be able to plan accordingly. So, for example, you might want to write your acceptance criteria, right? Like your guest first name, last name, your profile preference, your family members, the booking days, and the room preference, and so on, so on. So that would be my example.
Yeah, great. That's a great example. And generally, a user story is supposed to be delivered within one sprint in terms of size, and that's the idea here. So same, I think that you got the idea now. Create an issue, add a label to it, and add a template so people don't need to think about it. So when we reach the task level, generally speaking, the task is a decomposition of the user story. When you do the sprint planning, you want to know actually what are the things that you need to work on. So the team get together and start think about all the tasks that needs to be delivered. You can still use an issue for that. We don't recommend that because it depends on your situation. But you can simply use the task list from Markdown on GitHub, and it generally speaking that it does the job pretty well. So because keep it simple. Then the backlog. That's probably the main topic, right? It all comes down to backlog. So the issue, the epics, the features, the user stories, and everything actually is linked and is shown under the backlog, which is one of the most important concepts, obviously in Agile world. So the idea here is to use project, as we were mentioning. So you use the project as a container for the backlog, and the backlog actually can have issues, which means that you can have epic, feature and user story, and you can have pull requests as well because it's part of the work. So this is for the product backlog. For the sprint, we have the sprint backlog. So you can use the same mechanism from like projects. You can use that, and we have a new amazing experience. Actually, there's a new project experience that I'm going to be showing right now that really is powerful. And then you can use milestones as well if you want to have kind of deadline and so on that. One of my favorite actually events in Scrum is the sprint retrospective. And actually, from an Agile perspective, if you take the 12 concepts or the 12 underlying concept actually from the Agile Manifesto, the retrospective is number 12, and basically it says that we need to reflect and think about how to improve on a regular basis. This is one of my favorite elements actually in Agile. Some of the teams might want to document the retrospectives in wikis. Some others would simply use a project for that. And I'm going to be showing actually how I prefer to use projects for that because it can capture everything, and then you can transfer some of the action items that you decide in retrospective and transform those into something to be done, like an issue basically, and you can integrate that in the backlog after that. So pipeline is not an Agile concept, but it's in the Azure DevOps world. Is where actually you use to deploy your code, and the equivalent is actions. So just wanted to make the mapping. Okay, so let me go ahead and show you a little bit how it works. So I'm going back to the same organization that Ken was showing earlier. So I'm going to go into this repository that is the bookings to show you how it works. So let's talk. The first thing I want to show is the issues. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because Ken already showed you that. But just to reiterate on the fact that you have, as you can see here, you have labels that you can leverage. And what is interesting about labels is that you can very easily filter. So I want to see what are the features that I have today. So you can take a look at that. You can just go and click here. You can see the epics as well, so whatever is needed here. So keep in mind as well that when you use labels, you can use an API to get the data and if you want to have some shiny, interesting reports, etc. So Shengyue and Charlie will be talking about the insights, not specifically about that, but it's the same principle here. When you want to create a new issue, this is where the templates comes really handy. So you can see you have epic here, you have feature request, feature, you have user story, and so on. So you can basically edit templates, and the way to do that, you can go here, and as you can see, for those of you who are familiar, these are markdown files. So that you can pretty much create a new one, add a file, and it's very easy actually to create new templates. If I take a look at the user story, for example, what it does here really is that okay, let me show you that. Sorry. What it does really is that it assigns the label, as you can see here, by default of a user story, and you can even add some information so people have kind of standard way of creating user stories and so on. So you can do that very quickly. You can copy the file and modify it very quick, and you have a new template, right? So this is for the templates, and the idea is that when you say that, if I go here in the file, we said that the label by default is going to be user story. As you can see here, that's what the system is just doing for me, right? Instead of me doing it. Something to consider when you work on epics and user stories, you want to create a navigation. You want to have a nice navigation. So this is an epic. We have a lot of background information. We try to link this to objectives and key results if this is what you're using. And then you can easily have, add some links here. Again, this is Markdown, so you can pretty much do whatever you want. So you can have this navigation between the epics, user stories, as you can see here. This is a feature, and in this feature, I will have user stories in here. And in this user story, as I was mentioning earlier, you can have a task list, right? So you can simply assign this to the sprint, and this is actually the case. It's assigned to one sprint. And then you can work together and just check the box when it's done. So we have a pretty much clear view on what needs to be done, right? So continuing in the issues, you have the milestone concept. And this is actually, as I was mentioning, you can use it for different reasons, for key results, objectives and key results. You can use it for, so here for the sprints, so you can see that we have some closed sprints, and you can see that, for example, if I take a look at sprint 20, you will have actually the group of the user stories that you're working on and maybe some of the features that are involved. Generally, you will find user stories more than features, but yeah, in some situations that might be, we might have reasons to have features inside the sprint backlog. So the idea is that you can either add the issues from here or directly from this experience, pretty much where you are actually. If you have access to an issue, you can just come here and say, this is user story, and I want to assign this to milestone, as you can see here. So you can assign it directly to the milestone, and it will appear under your backlog. Okay, so let me go back here to the issues. And when you create a milestone, you can add a description, the title, which is, for example, sprint 20, 21, etc. And then you can add a due date to it. So you can have this interesting view about what are the deadlines and so on. So let me go very quick to project now to talk about that. We have two different experiences on GitHub for that. So this is the old project way, and this is the new one. So I'm going to start with the legacy one, or the old one. So the way you can manage your Agile flow, let's say, you can have a product backlog. You create a product backlog, and when you open that, it's pretty much a classical Kanban. So what we will expect actually in a Kanban board. As you can see here, we have a lot of tasks, and you can have epics and everything. This is one way of organizing this that I particularly like, low priority, medium, and so on, but you're not obliged to do so. And yeah, so we had definition between done and GA. You can use some filters. For example, you can add a column here to do filters. So I want to see only the user stories. So it will bring me back to the same, backlog, but only seeing the user stories and so on. So it's just to create some easy navigation here. And then from the product backlog, if I go back here, I can create actually a sprint backlog. And then I will say, these are the items that I'm going to be working on in the next sprint. So this team is not producing a lot of things. It's only 3 items here, but this all depends on your velocity. So you can switch between the backlogs, between the product backlog and the sprint backlog, simply by going here and say, okay, I want to assign this to this product or to this sprint and so on. Obviously, something to mention here is that in the sprint backlog or in the product backlog, you can have notes, you can have items, you can have issues, and you can also have pull requests that can be included here. So this is a pull request typically, as you can see here, and these are things that needs to do. Pull request is still work that needs to be done, so you can track that in your sprint backlog as well. Moving to the next one, which is the retrospective, as I was mentioning earlier. So you can create a project or just a Kanban view for the retrospective. So you can add things like what we did well, what can be done better, etc. And you can document pretty much all of it. In notes. And then you can even have some actions, because if you decide these are the actions that I'm going to be doing, you can say that I decide to do this. So this is something to integrate in the next sprint, for example. Okay. So let me walk you through the new project experience that is just shiny and amazing. Actually, I want to highlight two things that are the iteration, but pretty much the whole flexibility in the experience. So you can create actually a product or a project with multiple views here, multiple tabs. And you can pick, when you create a project, you can pick if you want to see it as a table, as a board. And it looks like, for those of you who are familiar with Azure DevOps, it's pretty much the same concept. So I can see as a board, as you can see here, Kanban board, or I can see it as a list for those who are familiar with Excel and spreadsheets and stuff like that, maybe who prefer this view. And you can do pretty much the same, modification on the informations and so on. Then you can, for example, create some tabs where you want to see only the epics, and exactly as we have on Azure DevOps again. So you can kind of save the filter, and you will see these are the epics. These are the features that I have. These are the user stories, right? So I can simply come here and create a new one and name it, or whatever I want. I can see epics and features, for example, and then I can, here in the filters, I can add a label, and it will help me actually pick, and I can add another filter very quickly. So and I save the changes, and it will show me actually the epics and so on. So it's very easy. Last thing I wanted to show is the iteration. So you can actually assign iterations, and this is actually new. So as I was mentioning, you can use Milestone for that, or you can use actually iterations basically for that. So let's say I'm in this view. I will go here to create a new field. And in the new field, I have multiple possibilities, one of them being iteration. So I can say, I want to create an iteration field, and then I will decide when the iteration will start. So I can, let's say December, whatever. And then I can pick actually how many weeks is an iteration, or how many days. Generally, people go with weeks. Nobody go with days. I mean, rarely seen this. So you can say 1 week, 2 weeks. So if you're doing Scrum, it's going to be between up to a month, 4 weeks. And then once you do that, it's going to calculate actually the iterations, create some 1, 2, 3 for you. And then if you want to create or more iterations, you just come here and do, very easily, I want to create iteration, and it will calculate the next one for you. And then if you go back to your items here, you can either see them as, you can see here in a backlog, or you can have them as simply as a board, because you can, at any moment, you can say, I want to see it as a board. So you can see it as a board, right? So yeah, that's actually very intuitive in terms of how you can see the things here. Yeah. So I think I reached the end of my presentation. And with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Charlie and Shane Gray.
Thank you, Absalom. So this is Charlie. I'm a solution architect in Microsoft. So I'm going to talk about the GitHub Insights, as well as the KPI we created on top of GitHub. So in session 1, we already talked about the difference between GitHub and Azure DevOps. So I won't be repeating the same topic again, but here I want to highlight. So both Azure DevOps and GitHub have their own advantages about the dashboards and KPIs. So the Azure DevOps is good at the agile management, the planning, and where GitHub is good at the coding, security, and policies. So next, we'll just have a quick look on the insight we have for now for GitHub. So first of all, we have the activity overview. So we can see the pull requests, the issues for a project, for a repository, or for an organization. And then also we can view and know the dependencies between different projects and repositories. So here we have the security advisories. So we can know how many low, moderate, high, and even critical security issues that may have on your project. And this is some detailed view of the pull request. So we can know the average size and the line of code for each pull request for any repository. So now I will just show you the what's look like in the GitHub. So this is the Microsoft organization in GitHub. So this is the activity overview. So we can see the pull requests. You can see we have about 4,000 pull requests and about 3,600 merged and 700 but closed in the last week. And also the issues and where are people working on, whether it's working on code reviews, commits, issues, or pull requests. The next thing is the dependency insights. So we can have different views of the dependencies. One is the security advisors, and the other is the license. So these are quick overview of what we have in GitHub Insights for now. And also, you can look at the GitHub public roadmap, and you can see what are there in the coming time frame. So, and the things we want to talk about today is the KPI or insights. And you can see we have this insights, which is planned for future. Okay, so back to the presentation. So we already look at the GitHub public roadmap, and we can find about all the features and issues that will be implemented in future. And next, we want to talk about the besides what we already have in GitHub, the insights, the activity, and the dependencies. So we also want to measure success, measure what the feature team or the organization's success, and that has been the most difficult problem in DevOps. So we want to measure what we care, and we don't want to measure something that will make people pick against each other. So one of the classic example is we will measure the for example the velocity or line of code for a developer that will a developer will complete in a day or in a week. And the second thing we want to emphasize is we want to measure the outcome, not output. For example, the line of code, the code reviews, or number of bugs. So that's an example of output. That's not a outcome. Outcome is something that maybe the customer or the user is satisfied with the product. So that's what we want to measure out of DevOps. And that's what we want to do in GitHub. And out of DORA, so it defines 4 major KPIs. So as outlined in the slides, one is the lead time. So that means how fast you deploy, you make your change through the production. and the deployment frequency, how often you deploy to your production, and time to restore, how quick do you fix your issues, and change failure rate, so how stable is your product. So that's the four major KPIs we want to measure out of GitHub. And this is the maturity or different levels of the KPIs defined by Dora. So we have four different levels. And this is a slide talking about introduce the difference between each different KPIs. So as you can see, so the lead time for change is when you start to develop a feature, and it ends when it goes to production. And also the change failure rate is where you start to deploy and it goes to your production. The deployment frequency is where you start to deploy and it ends at production. MTTR, or mean time to restore, is how often how quick you restore or you resolve your issues. So, and that's what we implement in our KPI in Grafana, which will be demoed by Shengyue later. So next, I will talk about the high-level architecture, what we have done on top of GitHub to make this happen. So first of all, we make use of the GitHub REST API, and as introduced by Ken and Absalom. So we have the different items. We have the different hierarchy levels in GitHub, and we want to collect the data, the metrics from different levels that we can make and produce those KPIs. So by using GitHub REST API, we are able to get the data starting from an organization. So, for example, the Microsoft organization, and there are hundreds or thousands of repositories within that organization. And under each repository, we will have different users and branches and commits to the repository. So that's where we can associate those KPI metrics to different users and different commits. And then is the issue, pull request, and deployment, which are already introduced by Ken. So those are the work items or bugs worked on by the team. The next thing is the workflow, which is action, the result of the instance of actions. So we collect the workflow and workflow run and the workflow run job, which is the actual result of each workflow. So with all of this information, we get this raw data into a staging database in Azure. So that's a staging area. So, and out of the staging area, we have quite a few Azure Data Factory pipelines. And this pipeline is different from the pipeline in Azure DevOps and GitHub. So this pipeline is data pipeline where we cook, clean, and organize the data into the format that we want, and into the format we can produce KPI dashboards. So that's how we produce the KPI dashboard out of the raw data from GitHub. And also, we have another IP from the Dojo community, which is test data management. So which we use to generate data for testing. And also, we can use the test data management to do data masking to filter and to clean up any PII related data. So that will make our data clean for the dashboard. So that's how we set this KPI structure up. And next, I hand over to Shengyue for a live demo.
Thank you, Charlie. So I'll be showing the Grafana KPI we are building for almost 1 year. And I'm Shengyue from Microsoft Consulting Service as a consultant. So as you can see in the Grafana, we have 6 metrics in the overview page. The first one is the pull request analysis. It is measured by the GitHub Insights now, and we also have this one as our first KPI. And for the next 4 KPIs, we are having the deployment frequency, lead time, change failure rate, and the MTTR. So these 4 are the DORA metrics we mentioned before. And the last one is availability. It is an important KPI we are working on. So let's go into each one of them to see the details we have. So let's go to the first, the PR analysis. As you can see, the data source, we have 2. One is a GitHub and one is a TDM. For TDM, we are pointing to the test data management. Charlie has mentioned it before. So for the demonstration purpose, we are using the test data for a better view. So here you can see under the TDM data source, for the organization Microsoft Consulting Service, and we can select one of the repository. And also we can select the data range for the data. For the PR analysis, we have the PR numbers, PR size, the addition and the deletion, the PR time, and also the PR quality, the pass rate and the merge rate. So this is a PR analysis. We are also can find some similar measurement in the current GitHub Insights. And the next 4 KPIs, the DORA KPIs, which are on the future roadmap of the GitHub Insights. The first one, deployment frequency. We are measuring this KPI for 3 environments, which are dev, QA, and production. So also you can find the daily average deployment in your organization under your repository and the deployment trend of each environment. And lead time to change. We are measuring it for the feature. So you can see here for the last December of the 2021, we have the lead time for 5 to 6 days. That is quite a long time. We can have our lead time to change improved after the future sessions. So you can see the future trend here, the lead time to change trend, and also the time distribution inside the lead time. It's quite similar when we're talking about the MTTR. So we change to the MTTR, which is the mean time to restore. We will measure this KPI for the incident, or we call issue. So you can find this dashboard similar to the lead time. We are measuring this issue trend, mean time to restore trend, and also the time distribution inside the mean time to restore. And the last one, change failure rate. So every time you deploy to the production, you have chance to have failure. So this dashboard is mainly focused on the change failure rate, which you can find your failure reason distribution, also your failure trend for different stages. And you can look at the failure rate you have during the data range, which is 44% at this time. And also you can find the trend in the production. So these are the detailed dashboard under the overview of the Grafana platform we are implementing for the GitHub for now. So you see the backend of the high-level architecture of the Grafana, and now you see the dashboard, the live demo for the GitHub KPIs we are implementing. So these are all the demos we want to share. So I will hand over to Dave. Thank you.
Awesome. Great job, Khan, Abdusalam, Shenyu, everybody. Charlie, thank you so much for such a clear definition and examples of how you can do things in GitHub today. All right, everybody. Well, this kind of brings us to wrapping up our second session, and we definitely look forward to seeing you for session 3. Now, please note the content in session 3 will be a little more technical than the first 2 sessions, but please join us on Tuesday, February 8th, where we will focus on core software development with GitHub. So we'll be covering things like a review of Agile management, managing code and ensuring code quality by using branch policies and additional integrations, editing code without leaving the browser by leveraging code spaces and pull requests. And you're going to be amazed at what you can do with code spaces. And using GitHub Actions for continuous integration and continuous delivery, as well as other types of workflow automation. And of course, we'll have our subject matter experts waiting for your questions and answering the questions as we go along. But you don't have to wait until our next session to learn more or to get started with GitHub. Reach out to us at msusdev@microsoft.com or learn more about DevOps Dojo at https://aka.ms/dojo-intro, or even get started on a free trial today at https://github.com/organizations/enterprise_plan. And for those watching along in YouTube Live, I dropped some links in there to our documentation and hands-on labs and following our roadmaps and everything. So plenty of homework, plenty of resources to dive in and learn more. So thank you for attending today, and we look forward to seeing you at session number 3.